So, the Europe Builds podcast is all about uncovering the untapped knowledge within the European startup ecosystem. And there's no better place to be than the Doers Summit, where for the very first time, founders, investors, and operators are meeting up to turn their ideas into reality.
The timing also couldn't be better. Some European problems may persist, but we're finally seeing winds of change, from the new Commission's competitiveness compass to reducing internal market barriers. There's a lot of room for growth and a lot of room for hope. So for all of this and more, join us for this series of Europe Builds episodes showcasing some of the greatest founders, operators, and investors from the Doers Summit.
Michelle, it's so nice to have you here today.
I'm excited
all
to be
the way
here in
from
Athens.
Taiwan?
All the way from Taiwan. Yeah, New York to Taiwan to Athens. It's been a journey.
That is why, even though we're recording in winter, you see Michelle on a t-shirt because she can handle it. So yeah,
You're wearing like 3 layers.
Yeah, exactly. So Michelle Parsons, CPO of Lex, which is, as you told us, an LGBTQ social app. You wanted to become the sort of app for the queer community, right? But also former experiences in Hinge, Netflix, Spotify, Kayak, so lots of wisdom there to uncover. I'm sure you've had to do this plenty of times at the Doers Summit, but give us sort of the elevator pitch. So in who you are and what do you do, like in your own words, in a limited amount of time.
Yeah. So I mean, my background honestly started as a high school science teacher. So it's always like a mind blow for many people.
What science?
I taught biology and chemistry. Yeah, so I taught high school biology and chemistry back in Texas in the United States. And kind of through those experiences kind of led me into the ed tech space. And then through that really got into product. What I love about it really is just it's a mix of both like the science and the creativity. And as a science major undergrad, obviously. And so it really sprung me into this the consumer side of product. And really what I love about it is it's really focused in on psychology, human psychology, really, right? You're thinking a lot about users who are humans, who have motivations, desires, needs, and then these products that you're building to kind of satisfy or meet those needs. So I've spent a lot of time working in the consumer space across places, like you said, Netflix, Spotify, Kayak. Started really as individual contributor, like an IC, and then kind of worked my way up to like running teams. And then most recently joined Lex, kind of joined the 2 co-founders, became a co-founder myself. We really pivoted the app from more of a dating app, an app that was focused on kind of like queer, lesbian dating, really to this social community app. We saw the gap really in the market, especially during COVID, where people were struggling to make connections, and just generally the idea that dating is really evolving, especially kind of as Gen Z and new daters come into this market, what their expectations are, what their needs are, is really evolved. And if you look at both social media and dating products, they're decades old at this point, and not really serving the needs. So, that's what we're doing now here at Lex. And we're excited to keep the journey going on.
It's funny you say that because if I think of the Grindr experience, we need to like move past that. And no shade to Grindr. But what was the light bulb moment for you when you realized there's a need for this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really came down to one core insight, and that really came out of the COVID-19 kind of era, which was our most retained users were basically hacking our product, this like dating product. And it was really a different product than the products on the market. So not a Hinge or a Tinder or Bumble or even a Her or a Field. It was really kind of going back to old school classifieds or personal style ads. So kind of think like Craigslist, think like you open your newspaper and you say like looking for XYZ. And so the ethos of Lex still remains that. It's still very a text-based app. We really want to put true intention and true kind of personality behind the content that people are putting out on the product. But what we found was that people were using it for other things than just like trying to find dates or hookups or whatever the case may be. Like they were asking people for, book recommendations, or they had extra sourdough starter they wanted to give away versus throw away. And so,
that's so nice.
We started seeing all these alternative use cases on the product that were naturally emerging. And so any good product people, I think, and any good founder, you're going to look at that hack, right? And you're going to say, what's happening here? And rather than kind of continuing to force users to hack their way through the product, we said, actually, we want to pivot our entire product into this for 2 main reasons. One, we actually believe that there is a there. We think that there's something much more lasting in this product to build something that we're not constantly having to rely on new users coming in, right? That's a dating app trope, right? A user comes in, they find a date on the first time, they find love, and then they're out. And so this juxtaposition of actually we want to be there through the entirety of your evolution, whether that's to find a date, to find a hookup, or it's just like you and your partner coming on to find a book club, to find friends in your neighborhood, whatever the case may be. And so that really was what pivoted us over.
I have a question about kind of Michelle Parsons. So you went from like these amazing, like big organizations into like startup life. How was that transition?
Yeah, I think like anything, I am somebody who is always very curious. I think that a lot of the work that I've done in these bigger organizations, I was lucky enough, honestly, to be, at Kayak like right after they had the acquisitions. The company was still pretty small. I think we were about 100 people when I joined. When I joined Spotify, company's still pretty big, but it was pre their listing on the stock markets. And I think I've been able to work in these parts of these companies that are still very fast moving, that have very much like startup vibes, even though they're part of like these larger organizations. And for me, really, like Lex was this like moment where I had gotten to this place in my previous role at Hinge, in this executive role where you're trying to do a lot more around like organizational design and politics and executive meetings and less hands-on building. And I had started at the company, and the company is about 80 people, helped grow that and scale that to over 300 people, helped scale revenue to over 300 million, launch in new countries. And I was just starting to feel like all I'm doing is designing orgs and hiring people. And while that's really phenomenal, and the teacher in me loves to coach and train and build up other people into product leaders, I was really missing that sense of just doing. And that's this whole conference is all about doing and building. I never wanted to lose that. I never wanted to lose that sense of knowing what's going on, like having my finger on the pulse of both technology and of both emerging, products and emerging trends that are happening. And so, with Lex, that really allowed for me to take a bunch of my skill sets and kind of put that back into doing again.
And one thing that we don't see that often in the Greek market, at least, is the fact that kind of your company was acquired by another company. Can you talk a bit about this transition, how it is, so that kind of Greek entrepreneurs out there kind of get a bit of untapped knowledge?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, look, we, like any startup, your goal is to obviously, either IPO or get acquired. And I think for us, it was the same thing. We were a seed stage startup. We were raising capital in a pretty tough market. And while we were raising capital, I think we have a phenomenal product. Obviously, we believe in it. Our investors believed in it. We get approached by a different company, curious about acquisition. And so we kind of had this moment of pause on like, oh, this is actually another angle or another route, that we can go down. I think the biggest learning for us is that I wish we would have been thinking about this in parallel to raising this entire time, kind of understanding the challenges that we were facing both in our own kind of fundraise, but also the market and how difficult it is really just to kind of grow in that particular market. And really what the benefits of the right partner, right? So I think the 9count folks were really the right partners for us. They already had this thesis around social connectivity and really connecting people that fit in really well with what we are doing at Lex. And they really believe in the mission, similarly to how we, believe in it. So I think for us, it was really the right partnership, the right fit, and allowing for us to really expedite and really just to kind of put the pedal to the metal when we're thinking about what do we need to make sure that our product really reaches as many users as possible and is the best product out there on the market for this use case. And so, yeah, it was a really awesome, I think, thing that emerged. I think my only piece of advice is, while you're thinking about this, always be thinking about acquisition because it's always another pathway. And these relationships oftentimes take years to build. And so it's not about, you might be raising your seed series, you might be raising your series A. It's never too late to have these, it's not too early rather, to have these conversations just around like, who could be on your short list of acquirers, right? Start to make those relationships, have coffee meetings, get to know what their goals are, have them get to know you as founders, use your company, your goals. And it doesn't mean that right off the rip, you need to think about acquisition, but it can be just planting seeds and watching those things grow over time in the event that makes sense for you.
So you have an ambitious goal, right? Which is to make this the queer social app, and I'm here for it. And it's a big and vibrant and beautiful global community, right? So how do you go about building that user base and sort of expanding it step by step especially beyond the borders of the US, right? Which I'm assuming is like part of the ambition here too.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. I mean, look, I think one of the things that makes social products so sticky is word of mouth growth. And that has been primarily the way that Lex has grown since its inception. It's still to this day about 85% word of mouth. We actually didn't spend a single dollar in marketing before maybe last year. And really what we're spending is like maybe $1,000 in like ASO. So, it's really a testament to the product that we build and the need state that exists within the market. If you think about communities in general, communities are really built by the members who are part of them, advocating for them and contributing to that growth. But when you dive deeper into the queer community, LGBTQ plus people across the globe, I mean, these are some of the most marginalized people that exist. I identify as part of this community myself. And unless you live in a really big metro city in the United States, I'm talking about like New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, et cetera, you don't have that really built-in sense of community unless you go out and seek it and find it. And as you get older, it's really hard to find that space. And many of those spaces that exist today in those places are really surrounded around bars and alcohol and going out nightlife. And so it's really hard to find somebody who might just like be really into creative writing or who might be, living in your neighborhood who you want to go play pickup soccer with or something of that nature. And so really our goal has been to grow via word of mouth. We grow through events as well. And really just like kind of creating this like tapping into culture through our social channels. So Instagram and TikTok and really leaning into that. Like how do we really think about getting the word of Lex out there to our communities or potential users is really what we're seeking through those things of just saying like people who are here love it, they advocate for us, and then we listen to our community and build what we believe they need.
That makes a ton of sense. I just want to kind of switch gears a tiny bit now and kind of learn about more product management, right? So what can European tech startups learn from kind of like a product-led growth?
Yeah,
from
absolutely.
kind of the US counterpart out there.
I think one of the things that we've, if you look at kind of the startups that are so successful, we all know, and that kind of have come out of a Silicon Valley or New York or the United States, is they really believe, I think, in two main things. And one of this idea you mentioned, product-led growth, is really being customer obsessed and customer centric. And this just doesn't mean just like, what are your competitors doing and like copy them? It's really getting to know your customers. What are the needs that they have? What are the pain points that they're experiencing? What are their goals? What's that aha moment that's going to get them to stick around and advocate for your product? And I think that that's really something that I've seen, even in big organizations, they don't always do. They're so quick to say like, actually management says we need this, or like the investor says we need this. And so they're going and building this without really stopping and saying, hey, what is our customer saying to us? We've been guilty of that at Lex sometimes, even when we're moving so fast. We're like, oh my God, we have to just hit. But we went, 2 months without talking to our users. And we're like, oh no, we got to get back to those roots of ensuring that no matter how you're doing it, whether it's user surveys, whether it's like getting a mailing list of your users who are interested in just giving your feedback. We started actually a group on Lex. We have groups there that just like is a group for anyone who wants to give their feedback and ask questions to us.
It's a feedback loop group.
Yeah, basically like
Smart.
Lex feedback. And then lastly is experimentation. And I think it's really about finding ways to experiment, to test as quickly as you can. Sometimes I think we can get into the loop of like spending months and months and months building something without even having an idea if this is going to work. And often we can get the insights from experimentation, but is it really going to work? Doing experiments is the best way to do that. And I think that data and experimentation paired with customer obsession is, I think, what's really made some of these massive startups work.
And experimentation is a very good path to essentially, so you've covered many different markets. So you've seen like the US, Europe, Asia now. Are users, is your role different in when you're applying into different audiences?
Absolutely.
Or is it, okay.
Absolutely. I mean, I would say like even it's a very interesting, I can give an example of a feature that's made at Spotify. Spotify is a really well-known company, right? It's customer obsessed. It uses data. It's really, they are one of the best organizations out there when it comes to kind of building products that customers love and that customers want to talk about. And a really good example of this is they are launching in Japan, and they launched the product that they had, in the US and Europe into Japan, and it was a massive failure. And the question is like, why? One is like, well, if you really think about it, like the Japanese market is very different than the Western market, the European market. And they have different cultural needs and different need states when they hang out in social settings. And one of those things is karaoke. Right? And if you think about karaoke in Japan, that's a huge culture. Every other corner you pass down in Tokyo, there's a karaoke bar and you go there with your friends. And so, really thinking about both, like, do you have the catalog of local music? That's number one. Is your algorithm trained to the need states and the taste states of that market? But also, launching features and products within your app that might actually cater to that market could be really phenomenal. And so actually it was launched in Japan shortly after that launch was actually lyrics that was then later applied to the broader Spotify.
I love the lyrics.
So they can actually sing it live.
Sing along.
Yeah.
And,
so it's a karaoke app as well, sort of.
Yeah, exactly. And so that was, done. So you could have some background music, you could have with words, without words. But anyway, these types of things are really interesting. Same thing with, with dating apps, for example, trying to go into these markets. Hookup culture on a Tinder or on a Hinge, for example, isn't the same in some of these matrimony-focused markets like India or Japan or Asia or the Middle East, where it's actually hookup culture is not a thing, or women make the first move is not a thing. It's still very much of these kind of hierarchies of men are going to ask out women, and it's really about this idea of chivalry and respect. And we're not just dating to date, but we're dating to marry.
I have a dual follow-up here.
Yeah.
Because privacy and anonymity in certain areas is very important for the LGBTQ plus community, right? So I'm sure that part of the conversation you're talking about also is maybe identifying some markets where perhaps that's more of a concern than it would be. So I'm curious whether you have a mechanism to counter that. And the second thing is in the overall trend of now anti-DEI, and the whole narrative, how do you see your company sort of responding to that?
Yeah, no, these are great questions. I think, again, when you're thinking about any product you're building, you're always going to look at your user base, right? So whether it's an app meant to connect people, like what are the details that you need and how would you go about connecting them, movies, what is the catalog and what are the tastes of your audience in that market. For our demographic at Lex, the LGBTQ plus community, there are concerns around anonymity, right? I might not be out to my community. I might just be questioning and exploring myself. And I don't really want all the other things that come around with being more publicly out. Or maybe somebody finds me a cousin or a friend and they had no idea. And so really at Lex, we do a couple of things. One is we do allow for people to use usernames. So you don't have to give your real name, and you can give an alias if you want to. We allow for users to actually hide themselves from being discovered. So you can actually come into the experience and be more of a browser. So I still might want to feel part of the community. I might want to engage with specific people, but I don't want everyone to be able to see me. And so I choose who I connect with.
And I mean, we know this is important in coming out processes as well, right? Sometimes you take your time before you say,
Yeah, I choose who I want to come out to first and second. And, we don't share that information around. And so those are some of the things that we do there. I think the other thing is really about control and privacy and control by design versus as secondary thoughts. And so everything that we build in the product is always about thinking about how do we ensure that we put the control into our users' hands. So we added comments, for example, so you can comment on people's posts in the feed. But we added a toggle. Maybe people don't want comments. Maybe that's the question. They don't want a bunch of discourse on their posts. So you can automatically have those off if you want to, right? And so all these different things where we put that control into the user's hands.
A lot of flexibility.
And for them to customize and control their experience to make sure that this is built for them and right for them. Versus many apps who you see not having that, right? So it's all an afterthought. This is a forethought for us. And then lastly with DEI, and I think you think about this a lot, it's really about us taking a stance and saying that this community matters and it's important for us and for our community to have spaces built for us exclusively and not as an afterthought, because there's so much harm that exists all across the internet in public spaces. And I think for us, it's really about creating that space intentionally and putting our boots in the mud. Recently I just saw that Google took off, different kind of holidays around or observances around MLK Day and Pride. next week, we are actually launching a romantic awareness week tag in our product. And every single week, whether it's trans visibility, lesbian visibility, we are taking that step to celebrate and highlight that in our product, not shy away from it. I think that that's something we'll continue to do to ensure that we drive awareness and that we're speaking kind of loudly and boldly about things that impact our community and beyond.
Awesome.
I would love to go back to one of the business topics you mentioned before, and you said like at Hinge when you were kind of, you saw that each culture had, or each country might have had different dating preferences. As a business, how did you actually go about and understood like what it is that each country needs? Did you have local teams? Do you actually kind of send like a satellite team there for a little while? Like how did you approach that from a business standpoint?
I think there's a multitude of ways to kind of go about gaining those insights. Like one is like you can buy data sets online to kind of understand just like the differences in both just like culture and kind of how people engage and interact. There's like widely like sensor tower data, et cetera. There's also, for Hinge, for example, or for Netflix, we had local teams in those markets who had kind of a pulse check on what was really happening in those markets and culturally what were the needs and why do people behave in the way they behave and, what were they seeking in this particular product? And then we sometimes would go, I think with, when you have like larger budgets and you can actually go out there, it's really great to kind of immerse yourself in those cultures. My team at Netflix, we went out when we were really researching the ways that kids and families watch together for some of the ideas we had around community or group watching, specifically as related to the household watching. And those things are really different when you think about India or even Japan or even the United States, where maybe in the US, everybody has a TV in their room. Maybe in India, there's only one TV, the main TV, and grandma's watching and mom's watching and, kids.
And they're fighting about which program we're going to see.
Yeah, exactly. And how do you think about what's playing on the TV? Because sensitivities around content, might be different. But some content around violence or kind of sexually explicit content actually might be more okay, like in some countries than others. And so it's really about thinking about what are all the need states that exist and how does that differ by country, by region, and then just getting a pulse check, doing research, talking to users there. And so really a variety of ways you can kind of go about approaching that.
I've loved all the insights, and I would like us to kind of close off a bit. As you were a teacher, a science teacher, turned into a kind of chief product officer, what is kind of the next skill you want to develop? If you could actually develop it tomorrow, instantly.
Yeah, I think for me, and especially like working in a startup for these past couple of years, it's really shown a light on hard skills that I want to acquire. As a startup, working in a startup, you're wearing every single hat. Like some days I am a designer. Some days I am trying to figure out how to code basic things. Some days you're customer service. Some days you're marketing. And some days you're product, right? You're thinking about the long-term, viability of your business and strategy. And I think for me, one of the things that I've really begun to kind of tinker with, and especially as like AI rises and makes this a lot easier to do, is really developing more hard skills. So one of the things that I want to do in the next couple of months is like leverage Claude AI to build an app, to kind of design that full end to end myself. I think that would help, just really help me understand more kind of what goes into
the process,
right? I think it makes me a more empathetic product leader, because you're able to understand actually that thing can't be done in one day that you're asking for, or actually making that small little change in the design actually takes more than 10 minutes. And so I think for me, that's just one of the goals I want. So, to be able to make that 10-minute change, in the future, I can make that 10-minute change and not have to bother somebody who's thinking about a more holistic strategy or a bigger design, and just kind of acquire those skills more myself.
Awesome. Michelle Parsons, thank you so much for being here with us today. Love Lex, by the way.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm pretty sure I'm going to be a very loyal user of yours.
I love it.
And thank you for all the insights and your time.
Very lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.
Alrighty, take care.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of EUROPEBUILDS, where we show that the European ecosystem is no longer an underdog story.
If you liked our episode and want to hear more, follow EUROPEBUILDS on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Born's YouTube channel.